Welcome back. We start off this segment here in Nigeria as the country remains one of the key destinations for investment in Africa, and its regulatory authorities are not unmindful of this. To smoothen foreign inflows and benefit from the opportunities that abound, the Executive Secretary of its Investment Promotion Commission, Yewande Sadiku, at a roundtable with the business community, shares some details about what to expect in the new year.
If we simply have good policies, we improve our business environment, but we don't proactively chase the kind of investors that we want, they may not come to Nigeria, even though they have capital to invest. And my sense, hot money, cold money, you need a diversity of investors and investor tenors. We don't want investors to invest in the stock exchange who will sit on their securities for 10 years and not trade them. We want investors who will play actively. But you don't only want investors at one end of the investment tenor spectrum. You want across the board. In the same way that you don't want investors simply from one region. You don't want investors simply to invest in one sector. We want investors across the board. And in my view, the only way to achieve that is proactive investment promotion. It is estimated that every $1 that is invested in investment promotion will generate $189 of direct investments. We have a number of challenges with pioneer status. I mean, the chairman of FPIs and I have had several meetings, us and then our teams, to ensure that in relation to pioneer status, we're working shoulder to shoulder. Our work is not sort of one different from the other. But there are a couple of things. The first one is who should benefit from pioneer status. It's a 1971 act. If you read the way the act is written, pioneer status is for any industry where Nigeria is not operating at a level enough for its economic development. Some people argue that's about everything. Nigeria is not operating at its economic development, or Nigeria is not operating at all. Or if the president decides in the public interest that it is necessary to designate an industry as pioneer. So the legal definition of pioneer is very different from the English definition of pioneer. So we thought it was important in the first instance to clean up the list. The list had not been updated since 2006. The last review by FEC was in 2006. We got approval from FEC in last year. In the context of, we're in 2017 then. Sorry, Federal Executive Council. I thought that I was speaking among people understand me, don't they? Is it only Abuja people that know FEC? No, but the Federal Executive Council had last approved, the pioneer list in 2006, and we updated it in 2017. Now, if you look at the original list, it's a very short list. It just says, it lists a few items. NBS, the National Bureau of Statistics, for the economic data that they gather, use the International Standard for Industrial Classification of All Economic Activities, ISIC. So we thought it was useful, even for the pioneer list, to use ISIC codes to provide more clarity as to what belongs or doesn't belong. The fact that an item is listed doesn't mean every sub-activity under that item is eligible. So we updated the list with ISIC codes, and ultimately what we mean to do is to gazette that updated list. There are one or two clarifications that we require from some MDAs before we put out the updated list. But pioneer status has now been available since the administrative suspension was lifted in August. We're working on a number of reports to provide the public with information as to how many applications were approved, for what sectors, how much was invested, how many jobs were created, in what states. That level of detail we will provide on an annual basis. But we're working in the first instance to, for want of a better expression, clean up the past. So from 1999 to 2016, we're working on a report that covers the period. We are done with the work, that's the reality. But I mentioned even with the work on the bilateral investment treaties that we wanted some validation. The same way for the work that we've done with pioneer status, we would like some validation. So we want validation of the results before we put them out. But is only part, in my view, of the work that needs to happen. You know, pioneer status is not supposed to, I mean, companies are not supposed to benefit from it for, you know, the rest of their lives. It was meant to provide some succor at the beginning of a company's life to help them settle or whatever. Then
And as the world's rich and powerful gather in Davos, citizens around the world are demanding for solutions to rising inequality. According to Oxfam, 82% of the wealth generated last year went to the richest, which is just 1% of the global population. Despite celebrating its 48th annual meeting, some activists in Kenya say the WEF has failed to curb the rising wealth gap, and they are instead lobbying for change at their own rival events this week.
As champagne and caviar wash down tough talk of world problems in Davos, the stench of rotten rubbish lingers over an alternative summit in Kenya aimed at tackling the chasm between rich and poor. The Kenyan slum of Dandora is known for its fetid garbage mountain and for this week only playing host to campaigners who are fed up with top-table talk and say they see scant action at ground level where it matters most. The annual World Economic Forum in the plush Swiss ski resort of Davos brings together politicians and billionaires, corporates and celebrities for 4 days of summitry on the world's most pressing issues like global inequality.
Well, it's interesting that the World Economic Forum itself has for the past several years continued to list inequality as one of the world's major challenges, and the World Economic Forum itself says it isn't getting any better. So by their own account, they're not fixing it. But also they have an interest in not fixing it. It's very nice to go to a fancy gathering and over caviar and champagne talk about why every child should go to school and every mum deserves good healthcare. But those same bosses, when they lobby for corporate tax holidays, are taking away money from countries that would go into that very same health and education. So we will not find a deliverance from the scourge of inequality from those who are, in fact, seeking to make it worse.
Located on the outskirts of eastern Nairobi, Dandora slum is a stark example of the inequalities faced by millions worldwide. Established in 1977 and partially funded by the World Bank with the aim of offering a higher standard of housing, the area has become the Kenyan capital's principal dumping ground. Many of Dandora's thousands of residents eke out a living on the tip, collecting recyclable waste such as plastic bottles for a daily wage of about 200 Kenyan shillings. Young people and campaigners in Nairobi are organizing the Usawa Festival or Equality Festival in Dandora on Saturday, with music and dance deployed to highlight social problems and engage people.
There are people in Nairobi who've never been to Dandora. They don't know what's happening here. They don't know how people live here. The only thing they know is the things they see on TV and people just talking word of mouth. So through our music, we are able to expose Dandora to the world.
Right now, actually, is to make sure that these people understand that actually things are not supposed to be like this. They're supposed to be way better than this.
The number of super rich in Kenya is among the fastest growing in the world, and Oxfam predicts the number of millionaires in Kenya will grow by 80% over the next decade.
And that's a wrap on today's edition of the program, of course, for the week. Thank you very much for being part of it. I'm Chimize Obi Iwawo.